The evening the storm came in slow, the sky over the city turned the color of an old bruise, purple at the edges and heavy in the middle, and everybody who worked in the Calloway mansion said later that they should have known something was going to break that night. Marcus Bell had been a chef for 11 years, and before that for 6 years he had been someone else entirely, a name in a federal file that nobody at the Calloway house ever thought to ask about. He kept his old life folded up small, the way you fold a letter you never send. Now he wore white, not the white of a badge, but the white of a kitchen coat, and he moved through the Calloway mansion kitchen with the same quiet control he once used to walk into a room full of danger. He did not need anyone to know what he used to do. He liked the kitchen. He liked the way a good sauce came together slow, the way patience turned plain things into something worth remembering. He liked that nobody shouted his name across a room anymore. He had had enough of that life. He wanted quiet. He wanted to cook and go home and call his daughter and hear her laugh down the phone. But quiet was hard to keep in the Calloway house because Diane Calloway did not know how to let a room stay calm. Diane was the second wife of Richard Calloway, a man who had made his money in shipping and then made twice as much marrying it again. She was younger than her husband by 19 years and richer than she had been by every year since. She wore her jewelry the way other people wear expressions, changing it depending on the mood she wanted the room to feel. Tonight she wore the Calloway sapphire and diamond set, a wedding gift from Richard's mother worth $4 million, insured for 5, and everyone in the house had been warned twice that morning not to breathe near it. The party was a charity gala, 300 guests, a string quartet, ice sculptures shaped like swans, and a kitchen staff of 14 working since noon. Marcus stood at the pass, checking plates before they went out, when Diane swept through the kitchen doors uninvited, trailing perfume and impatience. "The lamb is dry," she said, not looking at anyone in particular. "Fix it." "It rested 12 minutes, Mrs. Calloway," Marcus said gently. "It will be tender." "I did not ask for a lecture," she said. "I asked for it fixed." He nodded once, the way a soldier nods at an order he disagrees with but will not argue in front of others, and he went back to work. That was the kind of man he was. He absorbed the sharp things people threw and never threw them back. By 9 that night the party was loud with laughter and clinking glass, and by 10 it had turned into the kind of party where the champagne makes everyone forget their manners a little. That was when Diane went upstairs to freshen up and came back down 11 minutes later with her hand pressed to her bare throat. "My necklace," she said, and the whole room seemed to lean toward her voice. "My necklace is gone, my earrings too. Someone has taken the Calloway diamonds." A woman screamed the way rich women scream at parties, high and performative, and within a minute the string quartet had stopped playing and Richard Calloway was crossing the room with his face gone the color of old paper. "Call security," he said. "Lock every door." The guests were searched politely, apologetically, the way you search people whose names appear in society pages. Nothing was found on them. Diane stood in the center of the room with her arms folded, scanning faces, and her eyes landed, finally, where they always seemed to land when something in her house went wrong. "It was the chef," she said. The room went quiet in the particular way a room goes quiet when someone powerful says something ugly out loud. "Mrs. Calloway," Marcus said, stepping forward from the kitchen doorway, still in his white coat, "I have been at the pass all night. Ask the staff, ask the cameras." "You went upstairs," she said. "I saw you near the East Hall an hour ago." "I was bringing a tray to your husband's study, as you asked me to yourself." "Do not raise your voice at me," she said, though he had not raised it at all. "I am not," Marcus said quietly. But quiet did not matter anymore. Diane Calloway had already decided, the way people with money sometimes decide, that the truth was whatever protected her most and cost her least. She turned to the 2 private security men standing near the door, big men in black suits who worked for Richard and answered to no one but him. "Search his locker," she said. "Search his car. Search his home if you have to. That man stole $4 million from me tonight, and I want him in handcuffs before the sun comes up." Marcus stood very still. He had faced worse rooms than this one. He had faced rooms with guns in them. But there was something about being accused in front of 300 strangers, something about the particular low. Nelliness of standing in white in a room full of black tuxedos that reached down into an old part of him he thought he had left behind for good. He thought of his daughter asleep at home, trusting that her father would walk through the door in the morning the same good man he always was. He said nothing more. He untied his apron, folded it neatly on the counter behind him, the way he folded everything, and he waited. They found nothing in his locker. They found nothing in his car. But Diane was not the kind of woman who let a fact get in the way of a feeling, and by midnight she had called a reporter she knew from the charity circuit, a woman named Priya Okonkwo who wrote for a gossip column that liked stories with villains in them. By morning, the story had a headline: Callaway chef suspected in $4 million jewel theft. There was a photo of Marcus in his white coat, taken from an old charity event, his face calm the way it always was, and underneath the photo his name sat next to the word suspected like a stain that would not wash out. Marcus sat at his kitchen table that morning with his daughter, Amara, who was 12, and she read the headline over his shoulder before he could stop her. "Daddy," she said, "did you do this?" "No, baby," he said, "I did not." "Then why does it say you did?" He did not have a good answer for a 12-year-old, because there is no good answer for how the world sometimes decides who the villain is before it checks who the villain actually is. He only said, "Sometimes the truth takes a little longer to arrive than the lie does, but it always arrives." He did not know yet how true that would turn out to be, or how soon. The Callaway house fired him that same day. No severance, no hearing, a single phone call from an assistant who could not meet his eyes even over the phone. His picture was already circulating among the other great houses of the city, the way bad news travels faster in kitchens than good news ever does. 3 other chefs he knew called to say they were sorry, but sorry did not pay a mortgage. He went to the unemployment office and stood in a line with men and women who had also lost work through no real fault of their own. And he thought standing there of every case file he used to close in his old life, every innocent person he had once fought to protect from exactly this kind of accusation. Now here he was on the other side of it, and he understood for the first time in his bones what it felt like to be disbelieved by people who had never once had to prove themselves to anyone. He thought about calling his old supervisor at the bureau. He thought about it for 3 days. On the 4th day, he made the call. The man who answered was named Daniel Ruiz, and he had been Marcus's partner for 4 years before Marcus left the service to raise his daughter alone after her mother passed. "Belle," Ruiz said, surprised, "it has been a long time." "I need a favor," Marcus said, "not for me, for the truth." He explained everything: the party, the necklace, Diane Callaway's pointed finger, the headline that would not let his daughter walk to school without someone whispering. Ruiz was quiet on the other end for a moment. "You know, I cannot open a federal case over a private theft at a party." "I am not asking you to open a case," Marcus said. "I am asking you to make one phone call to the detective assigned to it, so that a good detective actually looks at the footage instead of taking a rich woman's word as gospel." "I can do that much," Ruiz said. Detective Grace Whitfield had 22 years on the force and had learned, the hard way, that money did not always tell the truth, but money almost always tried very hard to sound like it did. When Daniel Ruiz's call came in, mentioning a name and a service record that made her sit up straighter in her chair, she pulled the Callaway case file back out from the pile marked closed pending insurance review. She watched the security footage again, slower this time, frame by frame, starting from the moment Diane Callaway went upstairs to freshen up. At 11 minutes and 40 seconds, a shape crossed the hallway camera outside Diane's private dressing room. It was not Marcus. It was not staff at all. It was a woman in a caterer's uniform that did not match the uniforms the Callaway house actually used, a small detail that a tired party host would never notice but that a trained eye would catch in half a second. Whitfield paused the footage and leaned closer to the screen. "Who are you?" she said quietly to the frozen image, "and who let you in this house?" It took Detective Whitfield 6 days to find the answer, 6 days in which Marcus applied for 11 jobs and was quietly rejected from all of them, 6 days in which Amara stopped mentioning school to her father because school had become a place where children repeated things their parents said at dinner about the thief on the news. The W. Oman in the mismatched uniform was named Sela Voss, and she was not a caterer at all. She was Diane Calloway's personal assistant of 3 years, a woman Diane trusted enough to hand her own house key to but never trusted enough to pay what she was worth. Sella had watched Diane spend more on a single necklace than Sella earned in 2 years of loyal, invisible work, carrying bags, canceling appointments, absorbing Diane's cruelty the way housework absorbs dust, never complained about, never truly seen. Sella had planned the theft for months. She had studied the party schedule, ordered a uniform online that looked close enough to pass in low light, and slipped into the east hallway during the one window when the house's attention would be on champagne and small talk instead of hallways. She had taken the jewelry to contact 2 states away who dealt in loose stones, planning to split the sapphires from their settings and disappear the evidence forever. What she had not planned for was a chef with a federal record who had trained himself over 6 years to notice the small mismatch in a person's uniform without even meaning to, a habit so old it had become instinct, and who, in the chaos of the accusation, had quietly told Detective Whitfield exactly what he remembered. Her shoes, Marcus had said in his one interview with the detective. The caterer near the East Hall was wearing soft flats, not the non-slip kitchen shoes the catering company issues. Every single one of ours wears the same brand, the same tread. Whoever that was never actually part of the kitchen staff. It was a detail so small that Diane Calloway, in all her fury, had never once thought to look for it. But it was the exact kind of detail an innocent man notices when his own freedom depends on someone else's mistake. Detective Whitfield arrested Sella Voss on a Tuesday afternoon in the parking lot of a jewelry appraiser 2 counties away, holding a small velvet bag with 3 loose sapphires still inside, unable to explain where the rest of the set had gone in a way that made any sense at all. The story hit the news that same evening, and the headline this time read differently. Calloway assistant arrested in jewel theft, chef cleared of all suspicion. Marcus read the headline standing in his own kitchen, Amara beside him, and for a long moment he said nothing at all, because there is a particular kind of relief that arrives too quiet for words, the kind that just sits in your chest like a held breath finally let go. "Daddy," Amara said, "does this mean people know now that you didn't do it?" "It means the truth caught up," he said. "It always does, it just needed a little more road." Diane Calloway did not call to apologize. Rich people rarely do, not because they feel no shame, but because apologizing would mean admitting out loud that the shame was ever theirs to carry. Instead, she sent her husband's lawyer with a folder and a check, the kind of settlement rich families use instead of the word sorry. Marcus sent the check back unsigned. "I do not want your money," he told the lawyer, standing in his own doorway. "I want the retraction printed in the same size letters as the accusation. I want Mrs. Calloway to say, publicly, that she was wrong, and that she never checked before she pointed a finger at a man who was only ever kind to her family." The lawyer said that was not how these things were normally handled. "Then handle it a new way," Marcus said, and closed the door gently, the same way he closed every door, without a single raised voice. Word of his answer reached the papers within a day, because reporters like Priya Okonkwo, who had printed the first cruel headline, were hungry now for the redemption headline too, and redemption sold even better than scandal. Priya went back to Marcus, this time asking instead of accusing, and Marcus, for the first time, told a little of who he used to be. Not everything, just enough. 6 years a federal agent, a wife lost to illness, a daughter who needed a father who came home every night instead of one who might not come home at all, a choice to become a chef instead, to build something gentle after years of building nothing but caution. The story that ran was not about diamonds anymore. It was about a quiet man who had already given up one life to protect his family, and who had been repaid for that sacrifice with public shame from a woman who had never once wondered whether the person she blamed might have a story bigger than the one she assumed. The public did what the public sometimes does when it finally understands it was wrong. It turned all at once the way weather turns. Restaurants called Marcus with job offers he had not applied for. A well-known chef 2 cities over who had followed the story from the start offered him a head chef position at double what the Calloway house had ever paid him. Diane Calloway's charity board, embarrassed by the coverage, quietly asked her to step down from her public role for the season. Her husband, Richard, who had said very little through the whole affair, finally spoke to a reporter himself, saying only, "My wife acted before she had the facts. That is on her, not on the man she wronged." It was not a grand punishment. Diane did not go to prison. She did not lose her fortune. But she lost the one thing money could never buy back for her, which was the easy assumption that her word alone was worth more than the truth. She lost the comfort of never having to be wrong out loud. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the kitchen of his new restaurant, a small place with warm lighting and 11 tables, a place he had named simply Amara's after his daughter, because he wanted the first thing anyone read on the door to be her name, not his own. Sela Voss, meanwhile, sat in a small visiting room at the county jail, and the person who came to see her, the only person who came to see her at all in the first month, was Marcus Bell. The guards were surprised, he asked. Sela was more surprised still. "Why are you here?" she said, arms crossed, eyes down. "I put your name in the mud." "You did," Marcus said, sitting across from her, "but I know what it is to work for people who never see you. I am not here to forgive what you did to me. I am here because nobody in that house ever asked you why you were tired. I am asking now." Sela did not answer for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked in a way that surprised even her. 3 years, she said, 3 years carrying her bags, canceling her appointments, listening to her complain about a necklace while I could not afford my mother's medicine. I am not asking you to feel sorry for me. I know what I did was wrong. I am not asking you to be forgiven today, Marcus said. I am asking you to remember when you get out that the thing you were angry about was real. The unfairness was real. You just aimed it at the wrong door. There were other roads you could have walked. Harder roads maybe, but roads that would have let you keep your name. He left her his number not as a promise of friendship, but as a small door left open, the kind of thing a man does when he has learned, the hard way, that people are rarely only the worst thing they have ever done. The night sky over the city had cleared by the time Marcus locked up his restaurant for the evening, and the air outside was cool and honest, the way air is after a long storm finally passes. He walked home slowly past the Calloway mansion, its windows lit but its gate quieter than it used to be, and he did not feel triumph looking at it. He only felt the particular peace of a man who had been tested in public, and had not needed to raise his voice once to be proven right. At home, Amara had left the porch light on for him, the way she always did now, and when he stepped inside, she was at the table with her homework, and she looked up and smiled the smile that had gotten him through every hard month of that whole ordeal. "You're late, Daddy," she said. "I was closing up," he said, and sat down across from her, tired in the good way, the way a person is tired after honest work instead of after fighting to be believed. This story asks you to remember one simple thing. A person's worth is never decided by the coat they wear, the wage they earn, or the volume of their voice in a room. The loudest accusation is not always the truest one, and the quietest man in the kitchen may carry more history, more dignity, and more patience than anyone standing in diamonds ever will. Judge slowly. Check the facts before you point the finger. And remember that the people who serve you quietly are not invisible. They are simply waiting to be seen. This story is for every worker who was blamed before they were asked. This story is for every quiet person who carried more than anyone noticed. This story is for every family that waited for the truth to finally catch up and did not give up while it was on its way. The rain had long since passed over the city, and the sky that night was clear and full of small, steady stars, the kind of sky that comes only after a storm has finished saying everything it needed to say. Somewhere in a small, warm kitchen, a man who had once been accused of everything sat quietly with his daughter, asking nothing more from the world than the chance to keep being exactly who he already was.